Hey everybody, it's Andy, and welcome again to my office in Los Altos, California. I'm an attorney licensed to practice law in California as well as New York, and in this video I'm going to go over the 5 questions that I think you should be prepared to answer when you're dealing with the aftermath of somebody's passing. So in other words, when somebody passes away, obviously there's going to be the emotional aspect of it, sadness, surprise, shock, etc. But there's also going to be the legal aspect of it. So for instance, how is their property transferred? How are their debts paid off? And so forth. So this video obviously is going to deal with the latter of those 2 categories, not the emotional stuff, but the legal stuff. This video is obviously going to be specific to California, but even if you don't live in California, I think the logic behind these questions I'm about to go over, like the general version of these questions, is applicable to other states also. So even if you live outside California, if you want to be prepared, think through the answers to these questions I'm about to go over. Hopefully, they're not going to be too taxing. And if you actually have answers prepared, it's going to be something that's going to make you more prepared. When you talk to a lawyer, the lawyer is going to be more impressed. You'll hire a lawyer with greater ease and speed than you would have otherwise. And ultimately, of course, as I say in my other videos about 5 questions, you'll be able to kind of get out of your situation and resolve it sooner rather than later. So hopefully all that made sense about where this video is sort of coming from. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first question that I, as the prospective lawyer, would be interested in when first encountering a case like this is basically the details of the person who passed away. So for instance, their name, their age, what city and state and county and so forth that they lived in. And same thing, what city, county, and state did they pass away in? Were they a citizen of the U.S.? Were they a citizen of another country? All of that type of stuff, I think, is going to be really important because, well, I guess basically, whenever you deal with a new situation, you want to know all the details. The who, the what, the when, the where, and so forth. So in addition to that, all the details about their name, their age, place of birth, all that stuff. In California, at least, that actually comes up in the death certificate. So that type of stuff, if you can provide it, great. The medical examiner, the county coroner will be very, hopefully be very grateful. Like it helps it helps move the case along. So details and stuff about the person who passed away, that's going to be very helpful. So that's basically question 1. Number 2 is the person who passed away, the decedent, did they have a will, a trust, or some other type of estate planning document? If you know the answer to that, that would be great. That's something to basically research, I guess, if you don't know, prior to actually talking to a lawyer. So the reason why that's important is because if the person did not have any type of estate planning document at all, no will, no trust, nothing, in California at least, and I'm pretty sure this is the same for a lot of U.S. states, there is a distribution scheme called intestate succession. And I don't currently, right now, have a intestate succession video for California. If you're watching this video kind of later on into the future, this is June 2018 right now, but if you're watching this video way off into the future, check the link down below or check the description down below. If I actually do have a intestate succession video at the time you're watching this, I'll go ahead and I'll try to remember to link it down below, but go ahead and search my channel too. So anyway, if you don't have an estate planning document or plan of some kind, generally your stuff is going to be done by intestate succession. Your estate's going to be distributed that way. If you do, however, have a will and trust, and assuming it was executed properly, the distribution scheme generally is going to be different. Your stuff is going to go by a different way, not the intestate succession way. So that's the reason why. Is there an estate planning document? That's the reason why that question is important. Also really important, which, believe it or not, actually comes up as a surprisingly big issue, is assuming this person actually did have a will, a trust, or other estate planning document, where is it? I would have never guessed this, but it's basically something where I would have thought if somebody has gone through the kind of foresight, I guess, or gone through the process of creating a will, a trust, etc., I would have just sort of thought that they would have automatically set it aside in like a cabinet or a folder. Most people that I know at least generally have like one area, like a specific area where they keep all their important documents, birth certificates, passports, that kind of thing. I would have thought, like, if somebody has created a will or a trust, that they would have just put the will or trust with those documents. And based on the cases that I've dealt with, the answer to that is no. Basically, that doesn't happen that often. So when somebody does pass away, and it's established hypothetically that they actually did have a will or a trust, finding it actually is a tremendously or can be a tremendously big problem. So if you are watching this video and you have a will and a trust, for instance, make sure your relatives, your kids, or whoever can actually find it. That can save a tremendous amount of headache. So anyway, that's question number 2. Did the deceased person have a will, a trust, or other estate planning document? And number 2, kind of the second part of number 2, is where are these documents? Can they be found, etc. So number 3 is, I guess, if I phrase it generally, it's basically who are all the people that are in play in this scenario. So if somebody has passed away, this would be like who this person's family members are, their children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, etc. If this person passed away, this could also include the number of people that might surface to kind of make claims to property. If you want to think about it, it could be like, okay, number 1, who is this person related to? Who is the deceased person related to? And number 2, who out there, I guess, could this deceased person have left stuff to? So anyone who falls into those 2 categories, it's generally a good idea to kind of know the identities and contact info and all that stuff for these people. When someone passes away and there is a probate that needs to happen, giving notice actually is a really big deal. So if you have the names of the people, hopefully you can get contact information that way, and contact them and give notice whenever the court requires it, let's say. So that's number 3, to kind of identify all the people who potentially could be players in this situation, to know who the deceased person was related to, also to know who the deceased person might have left stuff to. Yeah. So anyway, that's basically number 3. Number 4 is, I guess, to know what the decedent's assets and debts were, to know what their estate was. One reason why you want to know this, aside from the fact that you have to kind of gather up everything to divide it, if you ignore that, at the outset right now, one reason why you need to know what the decedent's assets and debts are is depending on how much they had, I guess. Did they own real estate and so forth? You might be able to do something called the small estate affidavit process. So I actually do have a video on that for California. I'm going to go ahead and link it down below in the description for you. But assuming you meet the criteria for a small estate affidavit procedure, you might be able to do that instead, bypass probate entirely. And there's benefits in terms of speed, cost savings, all of that type of stuff. So that's at least one reason why you want to know what the deceased's assets and debts were, what their estate was. And on top of that, I mentioned it a moment ago, but in addition to the small estate concern, if you know what the deceased person's assets and debts were, it's obviously going to be one kind of you're going to be one step ahead, I guess, because ultimately you do have to gather up all their assets, gather up all their debts, make sure the debts are paid as best they can be, make sure that all the assets are distributed to the people who the deceased wanted to have them. So to do all of that, you need to know what exactly this deceased person actually had. So that's number 4. Number 5, I think, is going to be kind of a catch-all again. But the basic idea is, if you as the prospective client, if you know or if you have a good idea about what the deceased actually would have wanted, that can be helpful. It's more helpful in my experience as background information. So for instance, if you know that, let's say your mom or your dad passed away, and you know that your mom or your dad would have wanted this, or this is what they were thinking, this is what they believed. If that's something that for instance, that might be something that helps find the will or the trust, for instance, or it might be something where if one of your siblings, let's say, comes up with some scheme to say, oh well, I found this other will that leaves everything to me. If that just doesn't sound right to you, if you think that, hey, mom would have never done that, or dad would have never done that, that's something that could prompt your lawyer to investigate in a different way than if you had not told them that, for instance. So, as with all cases, I guess, to know background information about, who the person was, what the history is, what this person would have wanted, etc. All of that can kind of be I guess it's kind of circumstantially important, if that's a phrase. So it's helpful. Like if you know that, it's really helpful to kind of like I guess disclose that or offer it to the attorney that you're talking to. So hopefully that like all of that made sense. Death is a little weird to talk about, I guess, and most people. I mean, if you're lucky, you have somebody who's level-headed enough to kind of think along these lines kind of already. If you don't, hopefully this video kind of helps you guys out. So anyway, to summarize the 5 questions that we went over, number 1 is basically the details of the person who's passed away, who they were, their name, date of birth, where they lived, where they passed away, and so forth. Details like that are going to be really important when it comes to like the medical examiner, when it comes to the probate paperwork, if there happens to be a need for that. Number 2 is going to be, did the deceased person have a will or a trust, or is everything going to be going by intestate succession? That's important because it determines which kind of scheme, I guess, you distribute property. And also kind of as an addendum to question number 2, if there are estate planning documents, where are they? Locating those documents after the person has passed away actually is a surprisingly common problem. If you have not passed away yet, obviously, and you have estate planning documents, make sure that your heirs, your relatives, your family, etc., can find them. It can solve a lot of problems, and it's really easy to do. So that's number 2. Number 3 is if you can identify all the potential people who might pop up in the case, that would be helpful too. In my experience, that generally, like those people, generally fall into 2 categories. Number 1 is who the deceased person was related to, nieces, nephews, grandkids, children, whatever. And number 2, people who the deceased might have left stuff to. So this would be like friends, family members, college classmates, whatever. Yeah. So it's really helpful to know, again, the details of who the people are that might arise during the case. Number 3 is, do you know, I guess, basically what this deceased person had in their estate? Do you know what assets they had, what debts they had? If for no other reason, I guess, it's something where if the deceased person's estate turns out to be small enough, maybe you can do a small estate situation or do the small estate process, and that will be beneficial in terms of time, cost, and so forth. And then on top of that, obviously, if you're going to divide assets, it's going to be something where you need to know what you're dividing first. So if you as the prospective client can tell the lawyer that hey, my dad or my mom owned all this stuff, it's one step ahead, I guess, or the lawyer will be one step ahead. That's one less thing that he or she has to do. And lastly, number 5 is going to be, what do you as the prospective client know about the deceased person's wishes? So in general, I think this is going to be helpful to kind of as background information. I called it circumstantially important, I think, earlier. But, if the lawyer knows kind of minor details like that, that could always be helpful to kind of prompt a thought that the lawyer might not have had otherwise. Yeah. So hopefully all of that helped. The basic idea with this video, of course, is to basically educate you guys so that when you go talk to a lawyer, for whatever situation you're in, you guys know about more like, I hate to say what the lawyer wants to hear, but to kind of speak the lawyer's language a bit more than the typical client. Because if you do, then you're more likely to stand out. You're more likely to be a prepared client. Hopefully, you'll be able to hire a lawyer with less kind of effort, I guess. And ultimately, of course, you'll hopefully get your situation resolved sooner rather than later. Yeah. So anyway, hopefully all that helped. Go ahead and comment, share, subscribe, like, etc. And I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks.